In this video, I'm going to be telling you about every single fighting style from the worst in the game all the way to the best. And starting off, obviously, we got the worst fighting style in the whole game, the combat fighting style. This is a fighting style that you get when you first join the game, and it is the weakest fighting style for that exact reason. And it's recommended to buy literally any other fighting style as soon as you join the game because they're all literally better than this. But one cool fact about this is that you can actually never get it back after you get a new fighting style. That actually kind of makes it pretty rare if you think about it. Anyways, moving on to the next fighting style we got is Deathstep. And this is actually a leg-based fighting style, so this is actually one of the two fighting styles in the game that you actually use your leg for. You don't use your hands at all. The place you get this fighting style is in the first sea by heading over to the pirate village, and you find a gap in the wall right here and you can walk through, and then you can talk to an NPC called the Deathstep teacher. He sells you the fighting style for a total of 150,000 belly. A pattern that you will notice in this video is that the weaker fighting styles actually tend to cost less, which actually makes sense because who's paying a butt ton of money for a terrible fighting style? But remember that you can also get this fighting style outside the first sea because the Deathstep teacher NPC exists in other places as well. Next fighting style that we got in D tier is the electric fighting style. This fighting style is a huge step up from the Deathstep fighting style, but it is still incredibly terrible. The way you get this is by heading over to Skylands, and you notice these rocks here. There's actually going to be an NPC there called the Mad Scientist, and if you talk to him, he's going to sell you the fighting style for a total of 500,000 belly. The first move in this fighting style is called Stomp. It's where you basically just jump up into the sky and land down into the floor and deal a decent amount of damage. Next up, we got the electric tackle fighting style, and this is actually just an electric dash, and you deal damage to everything around you, or I guess everything you dash into. Next up, we got the electric floor ability with a 200 mastery requirement, and this one actually traps everyone in front of you, so if you hit them with the electric floor, they're completely frozen and stunned. They actually cannot move at all. It also does have a pretty decent click speed, but the reason this is bad is because it does pretty low damage. And that's pretty much it for electric. And before I move on to the C tier, one thing I should tell you guys is that the fighting styles I'm ranking in this tier list are actually based on how fast they let you level up, not actually how well they do for PvP. If you want a PvP fighting style tier list, let me know down in the comments. Anyways, the very first fighting style we got in the C tier is Deathstep. You might be wondering, why is the upgraded version of Deathstep this low down? Like I mentioned before, it's just pretty bad for grinding, and even though it's the upgraded version, it's the upgraded version of the worst fighting style in the whole game. The Deathstep fighting style is a fighting style that you can get from Fear the Reform, which can be first found in the second sea, but you can also find her in the third sea. And just like the Deathstep fighting style, this fighting style actually involves only your legs. You don't use your hands at all. The requirements to get this fighting style are actually pretty difficult. First, you need a 400 mastery on Deathstep. Then you need to get an item called the Library Key by defeating the Ice Admiral, who's located at the Winter Castle. And on top of that, once you talk to the NPC again, you need to pay her a total of 2.5 million belly along with 5,000 fragments. And the very first ability of this fighting style is called Rocket Kick. It's just the upgraded version of the previous one. You just launch yourself into the floor with a huge kick. Next up, we got Wind Bullet, and for this one, you just kick a very hard bullet made out of wind, I guess. Pretty interesting. It's similar to one of the Leopard Fruit's abilities. Next up, we got the C ability called Vermilion Drill. And for this one, you just start spam kicking your enemy by locking them in place, and they literally can't do anything. Next up, we got the V ability, which is called Maximum Overheat, and this is the only fighting style in the game that actually has a transformation. For this, you literally set your legs on fire, which just increases the damage all of your other attacks do. And that's the cool thing about this fighting style. It also gives it many extra effects that make it look a lot cooler. Anyways, that's it for Deathstep. Let's head over to the next one. Next one we got here is called Dragon's Breath, and this is a fighting style that you can first get in the second sea from an NPC called Sabi, and you can buy it from him for a total of 1,500 fragments. Anyways, the very first ability of this fighting style is called Dragon Rush. It has a 100 mastery requirement, and basically it just rushes you into a player or whatever is in front of you, or I guess whatever you're aiming at. Next up, we got the X ability, which is called Dragon Flames, and you just shoot out a bunch of spiral flames that deal a decent amount of damage to your enemy. Next up, we got the C ability, which is called Dragon Explosion, and this is similar to the Bomb Fruit's self-destruct ability, where you basically just charge up an attack and explode everything around you. The good thing about this fighting style is that it's actually relatively cheap. Even though it costs fragments, 1,500 fragments is not as hard to get as like 5 million belly or something. Damn. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this fighting style. Let's head over to the last fighting style in the C tier, and that is going to be Dragon Talon. And you might be wondering, why is the upgraded version of Dragon's Breath in the C tier, in the same tier as the original? Well, because these fighting styles are the worst that you can use to grind in the game, except for Deathstep and Deathstep, but I already covered those before. Anyways, Dragon Talon is a fighting style that you can learn from an NPC called Uzot in the third sea. And to get this, you literally need a 400 mastery on Dragon's Breath and an item called Fire Essence. And on top of that, you need to pay the NPC 3 million belly along with 5,000 fragments. That is incredibly difficult to get. Anyways, let's move on to the abilities. The very first ability of Dragon Talon is called Dragon Lighter, and this has some crazy effects. You literally charge up a flame and you hit a user and the flame literally turns blue because it burns so hot. The next ability is called Ember Annihilation. For this one, you just charge up a huge bolt of energy and you just shoot it to wherever your cursor is aiming. Next up is the C ability, and this one is called Infernal Vortex, and you just charge up a vortex and you just shoot it out all around you. And if you're looking for a short hit feature, this is definitely the ability you want to go for. Let's move on to the B tier, and this ability that I got here is actually going to piss off a lot of you people, and that is Water Kung Fu. You might be wondering, why is the fighting style that you learned in the first C so powerful? Well, that's because Water Kung Fu actually has no delay between its M1 attacks, and when you're grinding, the most important thing is your M1 attacks, because if you have zero delay, then you can hit your enemies a lot faster, especially if you're using the Buddha Fruit. To get this fighting style initially, you have to head over to Underwater City, and then you have to head over to the secret gap in the wall, and once you walk through, the Water Kung Fu teacher will teach it to you for a total of 750,000 belly. The very first ability of this fighting style is called Steam Charge Fist, and just like from One Piece, you just punch the air super heavily in this one and deals a decent amount of damage. Next up is the X ability, and this one is called Deadly Shower, and you just shoot out a bunch of water bullets for this one, and it deals a decent amount of damage, but you do have to hit all of them. Next up, we got the C ability, and this one is called Heavy Water Punch. For this one, you just charge up a huge ball of water, you dash forward and just punch the air with it. When I used to have this fighting style, I kind of just used this as a movement ability. I only used the M1 attacks to grind. Moving on to the next fighting style in B tier, we got Superhuman, and this is one of the most difficult fighting styles to get in the whole game. And when it comes to PvP, this is literally almost unchallenged. But since this is a grinding fighting style tier list, it's not going to be as high as you expect. And just wait till you hear the requirements for this fighting style. To get it, you need a total of 300 mastery on Darkstep, 300 mastery on Electric, 300 mastery on Water Kung Fu, and 300 mastery on Dragon's Breath. Damn, that is a lot of masteries that you need. And on top of that, you have to pay the teacher 3 million belly to learn it. Anyways, moving on to the abilities, the Z ability is called Beast Owl Pounce, and you just dash forward and just hit your enemy a butt ton of times, dealing a lot of damage. Next up is the X ability, and this one is called Thunderclap. For this one, you just explode everything around you, so this is basically a guaranteed hit, unless you're like 200 meters away from your target. Next up is the C ability, and this is called Conqueror's Gun. For this one, you just dash straight into your enemy and pummel them backwards. And that's it. Now we're moving on to the A tier. The very first fighting style in this tier is going to be Electric Claw, which you guessed it, it is the upgraded version of the electric fighting style from before, and it's pretty weird that the electric fighting style is in D tier and this one is in A tier. So you might be wondering, why does this upgrade so much? Well, the Electric Claw, unlike the other upgraded versions, is actually located in the 3rd C, so that's the reason it's really overpowered. To get the Electric Claw fighting style, you need to head over to the Floating Turtle Island on the 3rd C and talk to the previous hero NPC, and he's going to give you a quest to get over to the mansion, but you can actually cheese this using the Light Fruit, the Portal Fruit, or even setting your spawn there. And before you can actually do the quest, you need to have a 400 mastery on the electric fighting style, so make sure you go and get that. And on top of that, once you complete the quest, you need to pay the previous hero NPC a total of 3 million belly with 5,000 fragments. Anyways, moving on to the abilities. The tap ability is actually pretty cool. It's an upgraded version of the electric effects from before. You actually have a claw now. That's why it's called Electric Claw. This is actually because the electric ability is an ability that Minks from One Piece have, and if you don't know what those are, this is what they look like. They have electric powers, and it's pretty cool. Anyways, the first ability is called Electric Rampage, and for this one, you just start clawing at your target after dashing into them. A pretty cool ability. Next up, we got the X ability, and this one is called Lightning Thrust. And for this one, you just dash straight into your enemy, carrying them along with you, and then finally exploding, dealing a butt ton of damage. Next up, we got the C ability, and this one is called Thunderclap and Flash, and this is copied straight out of Demon Slayer, but it does look very cool and actually resembles the original move. Anyways, moving on to the next ability of the A tier, we got the Sanguin Art fighting style. And this is actually a fighting style that was added pretty recently in update 20. So it is kind of new and most people have not mastered or even got this yet. To get this fighting style, it's actually pretty unique. You don't actually get it from a teacher. You need to kind of craft it yourself. For this, you need the Leviathan Heart, 2 Dark Fragments, 20 Demonic Wisps, 20 Vampire Fangs, and a total of 5 million belly along with 5,000 fragments. And once you do that, you need to talk to the Shafi NPC, and he'll basically craft it for you. Okay, so the right-click version of this fighting style is called Gore/Combo, and for this one, you can kind of just combo them, what the name says. Next up, we got the Z ability, and this one is called Bloodbane Drain, and you just dash straight into your enemy and just kind of drain their blood by hitting them a lot. Next up, we got the X ability, and this one is called Scarlet Tear, and you just shoot off a bunch of claws, similar to one of the Saber Sword's abilities. Next up, we got the C ability, and this is called Devourer of Worlds. For this one, you shoot out a bunch of tiny balls, which just suck the life out of your opponent. And this ability actually has 2 versions. You can choose to shoot out a bunch of small balls or just one huge one. And that's it for this fighting style. Moving on to the final fighting style in the A tier, we got Godhuman. And this fighting style is definitely the hardest to get in the whole game and makes Superhuman look like a joke. Remember how for Superhuman you literally needed like Darkstep, Electric, Dragon's Breath, and Water Kung Fu? Well, for this, you need the Superhuman fighting style to be at a 400 mastery, which means you need all of those from before. And on top of that, you need Deathstep to be at 400 mastery, Electric Claw, SharkMan Karate, and Dragon Talon all at a 400 mastery. On top of that, you need 10 Dragon Scales, 20 Fish Tails, 10 Mystic Droplets, and 20 Magma Ore. And you need to pay the teacher 2.5 million belly along with 5,000 fragments. Damn, that is a lot of stuff you need to pay. The first ability of this fighting style is called Soaring Beast, and it's actually similar to the Superhuman's fighting style, except it does a lot more damage. Next up is the X ability, and this one is called Heaven and Earth. This ability has two versions. For the first one, you shoot out a projectile, and the second one, you just create a vortex, dealing a lot of damage to everything around you. The C ability is called Sixth Realm Gun, and this also does have two versions, which both involve dashing towards your enemy and hitting them a butt ton of times. And that's it for the A tier. Let's head over to the S tier. And there's only one fighting style in S tier, and if you guys watch my videos, you should already know what this is. It is SharkMan Karate, the best fighting style in the whole game if you want to level up. And the reason for that is just like Water Kung Fu from before, this actually has no delay between its M1 attacks. And since this is the upgraded version of Water Kung Fu, you already know it's better. To get this, you need a 400 mastery on Water Kung Fu and an item called the Water Key, which you can get by defeating the boss at the Skull Island. Then you have to talk to Dyrock the Sharkman and pay him a total of 2.5 million belly along with 5,000 fragments. Once you do that, you can get this fighting style. Anyways, moving on to the abilities. The first ability is called 12 Water Palms, and for this one, you just dash straight forward, doing a bunch of attacks on your way. Then we got Pressure Vortex, and for this one, you just shoot out a projectile and just drags enemies along with them and deals a decent amount of damage to them. Next up, we got Great Sea Spear, and for this one, you suck in your enemy and then hit them away with like a Kamehameha. It looks pretty cool. And that's pretty much it.